At 10:42 a.m. on December 1, 1944, Lieutenant Alfred Rose climbed into the turret of an M36 Jackson tank destroyer parked on a rise northeast of Beek, Germany. He was trying to get familiar with controls he barely understood, while German armor roamed the countryside 2 miles away. Rose was 26 years old, had been with the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion for only 3 weeks, and had 0 confirmed kills to his name. Across the Rhineland, the Germans had pushed in elements of the 5th Panzer Army, including at least 40 Panther tanks whose thick, sloped frontal armor could shrug off American rounds from 800 yards. Rose's battalion had already lost 11 tank destroyers in November, along with 17 crewmen. And every time, the story repeated itself. German crews spotted the Americans first, fired first, and wiped them out before they even understood what hit them. The M10 Wolverines Rose's unit previously used couldn't punch through a Panther front plate unless they were inside 500 yards. But getting that close was suicidal. Long before the Americans reached their effective range, German 88mm guns had already turned their vehicles into flaming wrecks. The Army brought in the solution in September, the M36 Jackson, built on a Sherman chassis but carrying the most powerful American tank gun in Europe, the 90mm. On paper, it could pierce 5.66 inches of armor at 1,500 yards. It was supposed to solve the Panther problem. In reality, Rose had fired 4 training rounds from it. He didn't know the reticle markings, wasn't sure how the range system worked, and had no idea whether the telescopic sight adjustments matched the manual or some field modification someone never bothered to document. His commander had been blunt: learn fast. The battalion was being shifted into place to support Operation Clipper, the push to clear German forces from the Siegfried Line fortifications around Geilenkirchen. Intelligence warned that German armor was counterattacking all across the sector. Panthers, Tigers, self-propelled guns, the kind of threats that demanded gunners who knew their equipment like instinct. Rose studied the M76F telescopic sight mounted before the gunner's position. The reticle had range markings in 100-yard steps, stretching all the way out to 4,600 yards. Maximum reach: 2.61 miles. He'd never heard of anyone hitting armor at that kind of distance. Tank combat usually happened at 500 yards, maybe 1,000 if the terrain was open. Anything beyond that was work for artillery. If you want to see how Rose handled his crash course in the M36's systems, hit that like button. It helps us bring more forgotten stories from World War II to life. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. Now, back to Rose. Inside the Jackson, the turret felt tight. Loader on his left. Commander above and behind him. Driver and assistant driver down in the hull. Rose ran his hands over the traverse controls, the elevation wheel, the firing system. Everything felt foreign. 3 weeks wasn't enough time to build the muscle memory gunners relied on to survive. He needed months. He had hours. The high ground northeast of Beek gave him clean visibility across the countryside, open fields, scattered trees, and a highway running roughly parallel to their position. Perfect for spotting targets. Also perfect for being seen. German forward observers had been calling in artillery all week, so the battalion kept its vehicles spread out, never more than 2 together. Rose pressed his face to the rubber eyepiece of the M76F sight. Clear optics. Decent magnification. He practiced sweeping the horizon, getting a feel for how the reticle shifted with elevation changes. The range markings stood in neat progression: 400, 800, 1, 200. All the way out to that last mark at 4,600 yards. At 11:15, something flickered at the extreme edge of his view. A dark, angled shape, moving slowly across the farthest limits of the sight picture, a distance that seemed absurd for direct fire. As it slid left to right across his reticle, the outline sharpened into a shape no gunner could mistake: a German Panther. Low silhouette, long main gun, sloped armor that made head-on penetration almost hopeless. It seemed to be following a road, rolling along at maybe 6 to 8 miles per hour. Rose's instinct was to report it and let someone else deal with it. The range had to be over 2 miles. No one engaged tanks at that distance. The ballistic drop alone would send shells screaming over the target or bury them hundreds of yards short. Crosswind would shove the projectile off course. At that range, the margin for error was measured in fractions of a degree. But the Panther wasn't weaving. It wasn't trying to hide. It was just cruising down that distant road, completely unaware that an American tank destroyer had eyes on it from high ground 2.5 miles away. The kind of shot a gunner might see once in an entire war, if ever. Rose was lucky, but not the kind of luck anyone wanted. He had zero experience engaging a target like this. He checked the reticle again. The M36 F sight had been built specifically for the 90mm gun. Those range markings weren't random. Engineers had calculated them based on muzzle velocity, the ballistic coefficient of the standard AP round, and typical battlefield conditions. That 4,600-yard marking existed for a reason. They believed the gun could reach that far. Whether it could hit anything at that range was another question entirely. Rose started doing the math. The Panther was moving perpendicular to his position, which meant he'd have to lead it. At 2.5 miles, the round would take several seconds to cover the distance. In that time, the Panther would keep rolling. He would have to aim dozens of yards in front of it, maybe more. To compute the exact lead, he'd need 3 things: precise range, exact target speed, and the projectile's flight time. He didn't have any of those numbers with certainty. The M36 Jackson carried 2 types of ammunition for its main gun. The M82 armor-piercing capped round was meant for punching through armor. It had a large explosive filler that detonated after penetration to maximize internal destruction. At 500 yards, it could break through 5.1 inches of armor. At 1,000 yards, 4.8 inches. At 4,600 yards, the technical manual didn't bother listing penetration numbers at all. The assumption was simple: no one would ever attempt a shot from that far. Rose understood the physics. Every extra yard meant more velocity loss, more bullet drop, more wind drift. By the time an M82 round traveled 4,600 yards, it would have shed a massive amount of kinetic energy. It might not get through a Panther's frontal armor even with a perfect hit. But the side armor was a different story, 40 to 50 millimeters thick, roughly 1.6 to 2 inches. That was vulnerable to the 90mm gun, even at extreme distances. Out on the faraway highway, the Panther kept rolling steadily. Rose made a decision that broke every rule of tank destroyer doctrine he had been taught. He was going to take the shot, not because he expected a hit, but because this was the only way to find out whether the M36 could truly operate at the extreme end of its theoretical range. His hand moved to the traverse control. He began tracking the Panther, keeping it centered while his mind raced through all the variables. Without lifting his eye from the sight, Rose called the contact to his commander. "Panther. Extreme range. Moving lateral." The commander climbed up beside him, peered through his own optics, and stayed quiet for 5 long seconds. When he finally spoke, he gave a simple response: Rose's call. Rose's shot. The loader already had an M82 AP round in the chamber. That was standard procedure. Tank destroyers always kept armor-piercing rounds loaded in combat zones. Rose focused on the range problem. The M76F showed distance markings, but estimating the actual range to a moving target 2.5 miles away took more than glancing at the reticle. He needed ranging shots. Artillery crews did it all the time: shoot short, then long, then walk shells onto target. For a tank destroyer at 400 yards, that tactic was suicide. Firing early gave away your position and let the enemy return fire. But at 4,600 yards, the Panther crew would never hear the shot, never see the muzzle flash, and would have no idea they were under fire until impacts started landing around them. Rose dialed the elevation for what he guessed was 4,000 yards, short of the real distance. He wanted to spot the impact so he could adjust. The traverse controls let him smoothly track the Panther's movement. The tank kept its steady pace along the highway. Rose led the target by about 50 yards, his best estimate to compensate for the Panther's movement during the projectile's long flight time. He squeezed the trigger. The 90mm gun thundered, rocking the turret. Even with the new double-baffle muzzle brake the Army had begun adding in November, the blast was enormous. Smoke and dust clouded the sight picture for a moment. When it cleared, Rose locked back onto the optics. At 4,000 yards, flight time was roughly 6 seconds. Rose counted it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nothing. The distance was simply too great to see the impact through the sight. He would have to rely on dust, debris, or ground disturbance. He adjusted the elevation again, adding another 100 yards to his estimate, and prepared for the next round. The Panther kept rolling along the highway, completely unaware that someone was firing at it from a distance 4 times greater than what any tank crew considered normal. Rose set his lead again, this time 60 yards, to account for the longer flight time at the extended range. He fired the second shot. The gun thundered, the recoil slammed through the turret, smoke billowed out. Rose stayed locked on the sight, waiting for impact. 6 seconds of flight time, maybe 7 at this range. He counted again, keeping the Panther centered in the reticle. The tank didn't change speed. It didn't swerve. No sign at all that the crew had noticed anything. No indication they had spotted the American position up on the high ground northeast of Beek. Then Rose saw it. A small dust puff on the highway, about 20 yards short of the Panther's position. The round had landed close. Very close. Close enough that Rose finally had real data for a precise correction. He now knew the range. He knew the lead. He knew the ballistic drop. He made one last elevation adjustment. Added another 10 yards of lead to compensate for the Panther's steady crawl forward. Then he set the reticle to the 4,600-yard mark, the furthest range marking on the M36 sight. Now he waited for the Panther to reach the exact point where his calculations said the projectile would intersect its path. When the moment arrived, Rose fired the third shot. The 90mm round traveled 4,600 yards in roughly 7 seconds. Rose held the Panther centered in the optic, watching for impact. The M82 AP round had left the barrel at about 1,500 feet per second. By the time it crossed 6 miles, its velocity had dropped dramatically, but physics still gave Rose one major advantage. The Panther's side armor was only 40 to 50 millimeters. Even a slowed-down 90mm round could punch through that. The hit was unmistakable. Rose saw a bright flash on the Panther's left side hull. His lead had been perfect. The round struck just behind the front road wheel, exactly where the armor was thinnest and where the ammunition bins were located. A moment later, a much larger explosion ripped through the tank. The Panther's own stockpile of 75mm shells had detonated inside the fighting compartment. The tank lurched to a stop. Smoke poured from the turret hatches. The crew was either dead or agonizingly close. A penetration in that spot meant catastrophic internal destruction. The loader would have died instantly, and the pressure blast inside the turret would have incapacitated the rest. Even if someone had survived, they had only seconds before fire reached the fuel. Rose didn't stop. Doctrine demanded continuous fire until the target was unquestionably destroyed. A stopped tank didn't guarantee a kill. German crews were infamous for playing dead, waiting until American units moved past, then restarting their vehicles for an ambush. Rose had heard plenty of stories. Panthers hit multiple times, assumed disabled, only to return to action after quick field repairs. He reloaded another M82 round and fired again. Fourth shot, same aim point. It slammed into the hull near the original penetration. The fire inside was spreading. For the fifth shot, Rose switched to high explosive. He was brutal against immobile vehicles. The explosion tore off external fittings and ensured the fire would engulf everything inside. Rose fired a sixth round. Then a seventh. He kept shooting until flames blasted out of every hatch and vision port. Thick, black smoke, the unmistakable smoke of burning diesel, rose in a huge column that would be visible for miles. There was no coming back from that. The crew was gone. The tank was finished forever. The entire engagement lasted about 2 minutes from the first shot to the confirmed kill. Rose fired 7 rounds, 3 to range the target and 4 to guarantee its destruction. The distance, 4,600 yards, or 61 miles. The absolute maximum effective limit of the M36 telescopic sight on the M36 Jackson. When Rose finally pulled his face away from the scope, his hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the realization of what he had just done. He had destroyed a Panther from a range longer than any armored gunfight he had ever heard of. The kill would go into the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion's after-action report. His commander and every member of the crew had witnessed it. It would become part of the official record. What Rose didn't realize was that his confirmed kill at 4,600 yards would stand as the second longest tank-to-tank kill in military history for nearly half a century. Only a British Challenger crew would surpass it, by barely 500 yards, during the Gulf War in 1991. For half an hour, the burning Panther stayed visible on the distant highway, a black pillar of smoke climbing into the winter sky. Other American units reported the plume, unsure whether it was a German tank or one of their own positions wiped out. Eventually, the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion's operations officer plotted the coordinates and matched the timeline. The wreck sat exactly where Rose's sight line from the ridge northeast of Beck pointed. By 1300 hours, the story had spread across the battalion. A quiet lieutenant, unknown just weeks earlier, had made the longest confirmed tank destroyer kill in the entire European theater. Crews from other M36 Jacksons searched him out. What range marking had he used? How many ranging shots? How did he calculate the lead? Rose didn't have neat, textbook answers. He hadn't followed doctrine. He had trusted instinct, physics, and 2 ranging shots that told him everything he needed. The M36 Jackson itself was still a newcomer, barely 4 months in combat. For most of 1944, U.S. tank destroyer battalions had fought with the M10 Wolverine, whose 3-inch gun was hopeless against Panthers and Tigers past 600 yards. The M18 Hellcat was faster, but carried the same underpowered weapon. During the Normandy battles, American crews learned the hard way. The enemy could punch holes in them long before they could punch back. The 90mm gun changed the entire equation. Adapted from anti-aircraft artillery capable of reaching bombers at 15,000 feet, the gun brought terrifying reach to the battlefield. Mounted on a Sherman-based chassis with an open turret, it gave American crews their first chance to duel German heavy armor on even terms. The M36 could pierce a Panther's front at 1,000 yards. It could kill Tigers at distances where the Tigers' vaunted 88 struggled to bite back. But the true power of the weapon went far beyond normal combat ranges. The 90mm M3 hurled a 24-pound M82 projectile at 2,700 feet per second. Physics alone said it could hit targets at 4,000 yards or more. The problem wasn't the gun. It was whether any human being could aim it accurately enough to hit a moving tank at that distance. Rose proved it was possible. Not with special training. Not with months of practice. But with icy calm and precise adjustments from 2 ranging shots. His engagement confirmed something the Ordnance Department had suspected but never seen in real combat. The M76F telescopic sight's 4,600-yard marking wasn't theoretical, it worked. Panthers continued to operate in the sector throughout December, but none offered such an exposed shot again. German crews, hardened by 2 brutal years on the Eastern Front, knew how to use terrain. They stayed in hull-down positions, in forests, behind cover, never again rolling casually along an open highway. The conditions that made Rose's impossible shot possible never reappeared. High ground, clear winter air, wide-open fields, and a German crew unaware they were being watched by a man willing to attempt what every manual said could not be done. 16 days later, the war changed overnight. On December 16th, the Germans unleashed the Battle of the Bulge. 3 armies, 200,000 troops, and more than 600 tanks, including the newest Panthers and King Tigers. The attack smashed into American lines and drove 30 miles west in 2 days. On December 18th, the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion received emergency orders: redeploy south. Defend Saint-Vith. Hold the line at all costs. The roads were chaos, retreating supply trucks, infantry rushing to new positions, artillery units relocating under fire. When the battalion reached Saint-Vith on the 19th, they rolled straight into battle. German Panther units were already hammering the eastern approaches. Nothing about Saint-Vith resembled the calm, calculated, long-range kill at Beck. The fight Rose entered now was close, violent, confused, a brawl in the snow and smoke of the Ardennes, not a sniper's duel across open fields. And though he would fire his 90mm many times before the war ended, he would never again face a moment like the one at 4,600 yards. The Panther burned where it died. For Rose, it marked his 47th confirmed kill with the M36's 90mm gun, and 46 of those kills had come at under 1,000 yards. Germany surrendered on May 8th. Soon after, the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion received orders to prepare for redeployment to the Pacific. The plan was to re-equip the unit with improved M36 variants for the expected invasion of Japan. But history turned in a different direction. The atomic bombs ended the war before the battalion could deploy. Rose never again fired the 90mm gun in combat. Yet the records from December 1, 1944 remained untouched in the battalion's files. Lieutenant Alfred Rose. M36 Jackson. Panther destroyed at 4,600 yards. Witnessed and verified. The U.S. Army published the engagement in multiple official reports over the following decades. Historians cited it as proof of what the M36 could accomplish. Gunnery instructors pointed to it as the extreme edge of what was theoretically possible with proper ranging, physics, and nerve. But the real importance of the shot wasn't just the distance. It revealed how rapidly armored warfare had evolved. The M36 Jackson represented the peak of American tank destroyer design, a vehicle finally capable of challenging Panther and Tiger tanks on equal terms. Rose's 4,600-yard shot proved the weapon could operate at the absolute limits of its engineering. And for 47 years, that shot stood as the second-longest tank-versus-tank kill in military history. It survived Korea. It survived Vietnam. It survived the entire Cold War. Decades of new tanks, new guns, new doctrines, new technology. And still, no American tank crew ever exceeded Rose's range. The record finally fell on February 26, 1991. A British Challenger 1 with the call sign 11B detected an Iraqi tank during Operation Desert Storm. Using thermal imaging, digital fire control systems, ballistic computers, and laser rangefinders, technologies unimaginable in 1944, the gunner fired a depleted uranium round at 5,100 yards, or 3.1 miles, the longest confirmed tank kill in history. Rose's shot moved to second place, but comparisons are meaningless without context. The Challenger crew had computers. Rose had an optical sight, a mechanical turret, and instinct sharpened by war. He hit a moving Panther at maximum range using nothing more than physics, a steady hand, and courage under fire. For 1944, it was nothing short of impossible, until he did it. The M36 Jackson continued serving into the Korean War, proving effective against North Korean and Chinese armor. But Korea's mountains made long-range shots impossible. Most engagements happened at under 500 yards. No one ever duplicated Rose's extreme-range kill. Rose himself survived the war. He left active duty in 1946 and returned to civilian life. The Army tried to recruit him as a gunnery instructor, but he refused. 3 years of war were enough. He never gave interviews, never wrote memoirs, never sought recognition. His story remained buried in after-action reports until historians uncovered it decades later, while researching tank destroyer operations in Northwest Europe. The engagement appears today in academic papers and military analyses as a case study in the absolute limits of human skill and World War II-era firepower. 4,600 yards wasn't luck. It was the outer edge of what a man with an M36 could do. This was brutal close-quarters armor combat, the kind where steel clashed at point-blank range and survival depended on who fired first. Panthers lunged out of tree lines at 300 yards. American M36 Jacksons blasted back from behind burning buildings. German infantry with Panzerfausts stalked the streets, hunting tank destroyers through smoke-filled alleys. In this kind of fight, even a 1-second hesitation was fatal. Rose positioned his Jackson on the southern edge of St. Vith on December 20th. His field of fire covered a critical road junction where German armor was expected to break through. The range was just 800 yards, standard fighting distance. No long-range tricks. No advanced calculations. Just aim the 90mm gun at center mass and fire the moment a silhouette appeared. The attack hit at dawn on December 21st. 4 Panthers rolled forward, backed by 2 companies of Panzer Grenadiers. Rose's company knocked out 2 Panthers in the first minute. German return fire smashed 1 M36 and damaged 2 more. The fight lasted only 14 minutes, but when the smoke cleared, all 4 Panthers were burning, and the German infantry had pulled back. American losses were heavy: 3 Jacksons destroyed, and 11 crewmen dead or wounded. Rose survived St. Vith. His Jackson took 2 direct hits from Panther 75mm guns, both glancing off the M36's sharply sloped frontal armor, which acted like 140 millimeters of steel when struck at an angle. But the open-topped turret remained a deadly weakness. Artillery airbursts rained shrapnel onto exposed crews. Several M36s were lost that week to indirect fire rather than tank duels. On December 23, American forces were finally forced to abandon St. Vith. German pressure was overwhelming. The 7th Armored Division conducted a fighting retreat, and the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion formed the rear guard, delaying German armor at every fallback position. Rose fired 43 rounds during the withdrawal, all under 1,000 yards, all at targets he could see clearly through his scope. The contrast with his legendary 4,600-yard shot at Beg was absolute. On December 1st, he'd had time to range, time to think, time to calculate. In the Bulge, there was no time for anything. Combat was reflex. See. Identify. Fire. No ranging shots. No careful adjustment. Just the cold, instant arithmetic of shoot first or die. He would never forget the Panther burning on that faraway highway at 4,600 yards. But the shots that kept him alive were the point-blank ones, made while Panthers were firing straight back at him. January 1945 was spent rebuilding what the Bulge had destroyed. The 814th had lost 19 Jacksons in the German offensive. 26 crewmen were dead, 41 wounded. Replacement vehicles arrived from depots in France. Replacement crews arrived from American training grounds, fresh, inexperienced, and untested. Rose became an instructor by necessity. He taught new gunners how to use the M36F telescopic sight, how to estimate range, how to lead moving armor, and how to adjust for wind and elevation. They all asked about the legendary 4,600-yard shot. Rose shut it down every time. "Forget that," he told them. "That happens once in a lifetime. What will keep you alive is killing Panthers at 500 yards while they're shooting at you." By February, the battalion was back in the fight. American forces pushed toward the Rhine. German resistance was crumbling but still fierce where Panthers and King Tigers held their ground. The M36 Jackson remained the only American vehicle capable of challenging them head-on. Its 90mm gun could punch through any German tank at normal combat ranges. Rose fought in the Rhine crossing operations in March, supporting the 9th Army near Wesel. German defenders included elements of 3 panzer divisions. The fighting was intense but short-lived. American air power and artillery overwhelmed German defenses within 48 hours. Rose's company knocked out 6 Panthers and 2 King Tigers during the crossing, all under 800 yards. April brought the final advance into Germany's industrial heartland. Most German armor was gone, destroyed, abandoned, or out of fuel. What had once been the terror of Europe now sat as burned-out carcasses along the roadsides. Rose's final combat came on April 23 near the Elbe River. A lone Panther emerged from a farm complex at roughly 600 yards, trying desperately to escape east. Rose fired twice. Both rounds hit. The war ended soon after, and with it, the career of one of the most remarkable tank destroyer gunners of the entire European theater.